What business or store that was killed by the internet do you miss the most? Arcades for sure. My dad used to drop me off at a nickel arcade with $5. I felt like a king. This is a big one for me. Arcades were how my dad and I bonded when I was really young. There was one in our mall growing up called Pocket Change, and we would always go race each other or shoot aliens together. I miss that place. I never got into arcades because by the time I was old enough to be any good at video games, around 2002 to 2004, basically every arcade game I encountered was $1 per play, and I didn't think it was fun to blow a whole $2 on one or two tries on a video game. Especially when I had an N64 at home. It's a shame that everything costs so much nowadays, especially here in Canada with our trash dollar. I ran into the same issue. Why would I spend $2 per play when I could just save my money and spend $50 on an entire game I can play all I want? They raised costs at the same time wages were stagnating and the price of their primary competitor was dropping. Plus I don't have to deal with a good 25% of the machines being broken or having issues because the owner is too cheap to repair them. If you live near a bigger city, they may have some arcade bars. San Diego has 3 I can think of, and I'm not counting Dave & Buster's or any mini golf places. One of them even has free game nights once or twice a month on slower nights of the week. 12-year-old me misses Toys R Us. My son will more than likely never experience the joy of being let loose in a giant toy store. As an adult, Toys R Us was still fun to walk around in. I've read that they're planning to relaunch Toys R Us in the States sometime this year or next. I hope that pans out. Edit. I am fully aware they exist outside of the States. The old Blockbuster in my town had a game console that somehow always had new and interesting games to show. Renting games before buying them. What a glorious time. Sure, there's demos and services, but going into a BB and being able to browse everything. Yep, edit. Yeah, Redbox and libraries are viable options, but aging brings a little perspective. I don't really get into games as much anymore, and with my job, time is a commodity that I have to plan my investments on just as much as anything else. My favorite Blockbuster story. I was in 4th grade. My friend's dad took us to Blockbuster. As a joke, my friend grabbed Grease, which he had seen before and wanted to watch again, and Basic Instinct. He handed his dad both movies and said, "I'm thinking about one of these, but I can't decide." His dad just shook his head and said, "Haven't you seen Grease enough?" and took Basic Instinct to the checkout. So yeah, that's how I got to watch Basic Instinct in 4th grade. Imagine what goes through the mind of a 10-year-old when they first hear, "I think she's the fuck of the century." At 10 I still thought women peed from their butts, so that would have confused the hell out of me. For some reason, it was way more enjoyable to stroll along the store looking for rental possibilities than it is to browse movies on Netflix, Amazon. I agree, and I do not know the reason either. I think it had to do something about it being an event, leaving the house, browsing with others, having a wide selection of older movies. It had a grand feeling of anticipation. Getting back home and sitting down to watch. It just isn't the same clicking or tapping a screen in your jammies. And all the Blockbusters had that same Blockbuster smell. I still get a whiff of it every once in a while, and it brings me right back. Yes, it was a whole thing. Somebody would suggest, "Let's rent a movie," and of course you go to Blockbuster cause they have the biggest and best selection. Walk up and down all the aisles. I loved looking up and down those tall shelves, seeing what all movies they had. Then you get 2 or 3 movies, get up to the front, pick out some overpriced candy and buttery popcorn, and your night is set. It never failed. I would always find on the shelf a movie that I forgot I wanted to see, and bam, there it was. I miss really good hobby shops. I build plastic models, usually World War II aircraft. Those high-end hobby shops have all they closed down. Now all you can generally find are RC shops that have a shelf of a couple plastic models here and there. The only exception in the greater Portland area is Tammy's Hobbies, but I'm pretty sure their days are numbered for plastic models as well. If you ever make it to Tokyo and still dig making plastic models, you will be in hog heaven here. There are many stores with stacks and stacks of kits, Tamiya, and all the other brands, tanks, ships, cars, you name it. Sales pros in general. A guy selling you a fridge who has sold fridges for 10 years and knows all about them. Now I look for stars and try to discern real versus paid versus bot reviews. Yes. Or the guy in the hardware store that actually knows what tool does what and can help you find the best fasteners and stuff. I really miss Radio Shack. I used to always go in there with friends and look at all the remote control helicopters and the crazy TiVo devices and everything that I thought was so awesome. It's so weird how those things were so revolutionary and now it's just like, oh yeah, you can get that at Walmart for $5. Their core market were electronic hobbyists. A new CM made them a Best Buy clone with a quarter of the floor space and stopped carrying the previous stock on store. No more electronic resistors, boards, chips, PCBs, gadgets, testers, etc. that made them successful in the first place. I worked at Radio Shack Corporate from 2005 to 2015, when they first declared bankruptcy. Contractor, not RSH employee. It was an interesting fly-on-the-wall perspective from which to watch the company implode from the inside. In short, they were killed by their own old school, inbred, good old boys club, out-of-touch corporate leadership, who, in spite of being in charge of one of the largest tech retailers in the world, were so out of touch with technology culture, they made every wrong choice possible from the inception of the internet forward. Up to that point, the economy and retail were sufficiently stable and strong to accommodate the incompetency and cluelessness typical of too many entitled and connected senior executives who enjoyed their positions of power, not because of merit, but because of who they were connected to, while the real work of running the show was done by the people beneath them. Kind of like the guys fucking things up in the White House and Senate. At the turn of the millennium, Radio Shack CEO, Len Roberts, sealed its fate when he fucked up and dismissed the internet as a fad, doubling down on expansion by opening thousands of stores. He later recruited Dave Edmondson, based on an inspiring conversation at an airport bar, to be his successor. Edmondson turned out to be a substance-abusing con man with a fake divinity degree and no ability to run the company. He was finally outed by activist investors sick of the company having to pay a limo service for Edmondson's daily commute, as his license was revoked for DUI. Claire Bobrowski followed Edmondson, and when the validity of her own master's degree was called into question, all executive profiles were immediately taken off the website. Radio Shack then brought on Julian Day, turnaround expert most well known for his merger of Kmart and Sears. In reality, Day only knew one play: slash costs to temporarily pump profits, and then dump the company to a dumb buyer. Unfortunately, the recession hit and all LBO activity dried up. No suckers wanted to buy the pig. By this point, for more than a decade, Radio Shack had languished under the leadership of old boy network managers and board members who know more about golf and their golden parachutes than actually creating value in retail, let alone the fast changing world of consumer electronics. Lacking any kind of vision, they ostensibly chase the easy money of cell phone sales, unprepared for the category death to be brought on by the advent of smartphones, which replaced previous money makers like GPS, digital cameras, MP3 players, PDAs, DVD players, laptops and tablets. Private label products were relatively expensive and garbage quality that violated customer trust and ran them off. Experienced store managers and employees were run off by impossible sales goals and replaced with minimum wage workers. Turnover destroyed customer experience in stores, and Radio Shack killed their "you have questions, we have answers" slogan, because store workers really only knew how to shill for cell phones. And oh yeah, let's burn cash on a celebrity endorsement. Lance Armstrong. This way the C-suite gets free trips to Europe for the Tour de France as a legit business expense. Who care if WTF does Armstrong have to do with tech? And then, like the opposite of the Midas touch, everything Radio Shack leadership did turned to shit. Armstrong is disgraced by a doping scandal. Out of ideas, Day ultimately cashed in his bonus and left his CFO in charge, a guy who knew even less about marketing and retail. With the economy flat and no more costs left to cut, he had no other option than to shut down thousands of stores and begin working the company toward bankruptcy. Finally, Joe Magnacco spent a year manufacturing visible signs of progress sufficient to convince gullible lenders to extend more financing and ultimately make the case to a bankruptcy court judge that a restructuring through bankruptcy was feasible. Joe pulled it off. Radio Shack was sold off to Sprint and General Wireless, continued to wane and ultimately died. The reality is, the economy is competitive and will eventually crush entities led by incompetent managers. They will last long enough to siphon a lot of wealth off the organization and leave just in time to escape the shit show they left behind. There's a reason these guys always negotiate incentive packages that mature within 3-4 years. That's the maximum time they can pretend to be making a difference before the results become undeniable. Radio Shack could have been the local maker center, IT hub, and content destination for the online STEM enthusiast community. But to do that, top leadership has to get it to set the vision and make it happen. And Radio Shack's old school baby boomer executive culture was just too out of touch and would never make the leap. I used to be into ham radio and would visit Radio Shack all of the time to buy electronics parts like resistors, diodes, transformers and such. One time I went in to buy a rooftop PV antenna for a project I was working on and the guy was like, yeah, we have one in the back. It's been there for at least 15 years. You can have it for free. Did any of you guys have that Discovery Nature store at your malls? It would have those Native American rain tubes that when placed on its top or bottom had the beads inside sound like it was raining. That and had a bunch of cool scene on TV toys and books. It was great. Then one day it was just gone. Wish it was still around today, so that it would still be cool to learn. Before they were bought out to become the Discovery Channel store, they were called the Nature Company. It was the most fun job for a 16-year-old in the 90s. I haven't thought about the Nature Company in about 25 years. Holy shit, I wanted a motherfucking rain stick. Borders. Yes, I used to hang out at my local one after school every day. Went to the release parties for 4 Harry Potter books too. I remember the way it smelled, the way the coffee tasted, the comfortable spaces where you could sit and read. I miss that. I went to the release party for Harry Potter 6 and 7 at Borders Store number 1 in Ann Arbor, MI, and took part in all the games and whatnot. But I was never on the pre-sale list, so I wasn't able to get the book there since they were otherwise already sold out. And then at midnight, I drove across town to actually buy the book at a 24-hour Kroger's, where there was no line and they had 100s of copies that they put out right at midnight in front of the produce section. Most of the shops in my small country town close because everyone orders everything off of Amazon. And now there's many abandoned buildings. Funny to see Amazon has replaced Walmart as the boogeyman that's killing mom and pop stores. Flea markets. Yes, I know they still exist. The problem is that thanks to the proliferation of the internet, it's pretty difficult to find a good deal on much of anything, especially games. People check the prices on eBay and other places and just price around that. You could go to a dozen flea markets or pop-up shops and the same game will be around the same price at every single one of them. Go to beat the flea market vendors to the product. Most peeps are just buying stuff from estate sales. Co-worker who works flea markets is always talking about getting crap loads of shit for dirt cheap at estate sales. Not exactly the same experience as a flea market, but if you're just in the market for cheap shit then yeah. Malls. I miss the glory days of malls. Being able to go hang out, grab some food, etc. It's just not the same anymore. Just think, there's already a generation of kids who will never be able to understand the movie Mallrats. The Sears catalog. I used to love going through that as a kid around Christmas and seeing what I wanted to ask Santa for. What's stupid is Sears could have been bigger than Amazon since they already had a head start on the order from home business, but they just didn't embrace the internet and now Sears is dying. The Sears catalog was my porn growing up in the 70s. Oh yeah, the marketing execs knew that. The underwear section was there for a reason, to get the guys to read it and then order tools and such. Imagine if Sears had put its catalog online and fully embraced the internet back in the 90s. On the back end there isn't much difference between a mail order business and an online business. Sears could have become Amazon before Amazon started selling books. Sears could have created buy online, pick up in store or, it's amazing that they invented remote shopping and completely missed out on e-commerce.